Thanks everyone for joining us today for a bit of a briefing on a bit of a market update, I should say, rather than a market briefing per se on a specific procurement. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick Seares. I'm the Managing Director of Westport. We do try to do these things periodically, just to keep everyone aware of what's happening and what's going on. And at the end of this session, we will have a little straw poll to see how often you would like these updates to occur, even if there isn't any substantive procurement underway. We'll get to that later on in the agenda. I also just want to thank everyone. We have been obviously a little bit quiet over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, just while we got the business case finished at the end of July, as we committed to do several years ago, and obviously have then dealt with that through the process of IWA and others to get government to consider that business case. So appreciate all of your patience while we did that, and get ready for the next stage. Right, I'm going to share now the obligatory PowerPoint slide. Excellent. Can everyone see that? Yes, great, thank you. All right, so it's good. This diagram you've seen a few times, and the "we are here" arrows just moved a little bit, which is a nice little stage. If you think about stage gateways for something like this, we have now moved from business case stage. The Premier announced last Monday that they would be investing $273 million in the next stage of Westport to see us through the definition phase to get to the final investment decision. So this is a really, really big milestone for Westport and for the team here. I just wanted to sort of quickly take a moment to say thank you to the Westport team. The work that they did under quite a substantial amount of pressure and a huge amount of complexity with an extraordinary sort of level of stakeholder engagement and diversity was quite exceptional. And I think they should be congratulated for giving the program that probably all of us in some way, shape or form will work on over the next sort of 10 to 15 years, a really stable and solid footing. I think that's really, really important. It's going to be great for the program. So we are, as I said, we are now into definition delivery. The government made a decision and announced it last week. So we are now at the point of just being able to tool up for that. I think it's important as we look forward as well, just to sort of acknowledge that it is definition or development in main road speak of infrastructure, but there's an awful lot more to Westport. I always belabor this point, that there's a huge amount of commercial, environmental and social and economic and policy activity that needs to happen alongside the building of new infrastructure to make sure that the supply chain of containers works well for Western Australia and can actually transition at the end of the 2030s if that's what government decides to do. Also, just trying to make sure we always come back to think about Westport goals. These goals, which I'm sure you're bored of me talking about to you, have driven the program for the last 2.5, 3 years. They've driven our decision-making processes, our multi-criteria analysis, the design, the focus on commercial frameworks. Everything can be traced back to these goals, something I'm really pleased we've been able to maintain. And we're just going through the process now of looking at how do we tweak these goals to make them suitable for the definition and delivery phase of the program. There will be a few tweaks to them just to make them perhaps a bit more measurable, a bit smarter in some areas where it's been a bit challenging in the past. And we probably will also be adding a section just in terms of how we make sure that the build and the delivery of this program leaves a legacy for Western Australia beyond just the really great performance of a supply chain articulated here. But the way we build this is beneficial in terms of sustainability, in terms of workforce diversity, in terms of local benefits as well. And so those things will be enhancements to these goals, which will drive all of our procurement, our contract management, and our success as we move forwards into Westport Stage 4. As I said, the $273 million was announced last week will help us with the definition of the program. And when I say the definition of the program, it is the program consisting of all 14 or 15 packages, I think 14 packages, I should say, that were included in our commercial framework. So this includes all of the road and the rail and the port side of things as well. It's really important to understand what definition is. I'm sure everyone who works in Western Australia infrastructure understands, but in WA, our strategic asset management framework, so if you want to have a search on the Treasury's website, you'll see this for any project over $100 million is you go through strategic optioning, which was done back in 2019. You then develop a business case, which obviously we went a long way further than you normally would at a business case stage, but that was valid for a project like this, and we finished. You then do definition, where you really you further refine the design, but you deal with all the major risks and issues that we've costed as part of our cost forecast and articulate. We need to resolve all those risks, resolve all the commercial agreements with utility owners, State Agreement Act owners, landowners, and everything to be able to facilitate the program. We need to have all of the site surveys like geotech and everything done so we can sort of fully understand the operating environment. And we need to get all of our approvals in place so that when we go to government at the end of the definition phase, we can say, well, here's a more refined cost estimate, here's a more refined construction strategy. We think we're now ready to go out and seek a contractor to build it. And so that's really, when we say definition, that's what we're talking about, getting to the point where it's a FID, if you like, an absolute, okay, next week we're contracting the services and getting on with building. I'm sure all of you have seen this, but again, when we talk around definition and we talk around stage 4, we're talking about pretty much everything on that map with a number on it, except perhaps a little bit in terms of the twos, in terms of the intermodal terminals. Obviously, there's a great announcement, great opening a couple of months ago of the Kenwick IMT that will see support both Fremantle and then Westport in Kwinana for at least a couple of decades before we need to start to think about growing Kewdale. So we will be sort of thinking about master planning for Kewdale at the tail end of our program, but we won't be doing a substantial amount of upgrades to those IMTs aside from the rail connections in and out of them as part of the next 10 years of infrastructure development. Our indicative schedule, obviously you can see this if you haven't read the document. I think there's a link to it, the public facing business case. There may be a link to it later in the presentation, or you can just have a look at our website. Is in here. So just again, trying to reiterate the fact that we're already in environmental approvals for both Anketel Road and for the port. The referrals were made in the middle of, March. They were made in March. A scoping report has just been released, so we're progressing well with that. Looking forward to the inputs of the geophys, which is currently underway, and future geotech into finalising that. In terms of, we will now move into definition again for port and road and rail. We'll get to a bit more detail on that later. And then obviously, if the government does decide to support those, which they just want to belabor the point, they haven't invested in the full X billion of dollars for Westport. They've invested in the definition phase at this point. Then we move on to onto delivery. The moment we continue to target end of the 2030s. This is a important time, and I think end of the 2030s, everyone who works in major infrastructure knows it's much better to talk about the end of the 2030s and give a specific month on a specific year, and it gives us the confidence to be able to make sure we build the infrastructure in a sensible, careful way, especially given where we're building this infrastructure. We need to take care of the environment, we need to take care of the community, we need to take care of surrounding industry, but also make sure we've got a really coherent and sensible stage delivery of infrastructure and all the non-infrastructure activities required to open up a new supply chain in Kwinana at the end of the 2030s. We'll obviously keep an eye on things like trade forecasts and ship sizes and all of those activities as we go through the program, just to make sure we continue to focus on hitting the right date for the economy and for the community at large. I've spoken to you about Westport Stage 4 organisation previously, so again, just to cement this in, we'll be running Westport as a program. So we are trying to deliver. You know, if you go back and look at those goals, or you look at our benefits management framework, there's actually nothing in there at the moment which says build this bit of infrastructure or that bit of infrastructure. The infrastructure is all a necessary component that we need to do to get to those goals, but so is there a lot of other work as well. So it's obviously sensible for us to manage this as a program to make sure the interfaces, both the infrastructure interfaces and also the non-infrastructure interfaces and optimization of performance work together. Projects will be run for a range of technical, data, policy, environmental, and other non-infrastructure projects out of the Westport office. We may be contracting, if you like, or working with project partners around government where there's statutory policy changes required. Optiv will be delivering the road and rail infrastructure, obviously with the Seares capability that we've got over there, and obviously a lot of immediate connection into industry right now. Finishing off Metronet and the major rod projects allows those lessons to be taken forward, lessons learned to be taken forward. We don't have the ready capability in the state to develop really major marine infrastructure of this scale. We do some great work through DOT Maritime and through the ports, but largely in terms of massive greenfields development like this, it's not something we have the internal capability. So we'll be developing and delivering that through Westport with the assistance of a technical advisor, but in particular an integrated delivery partner who will come on board to complement and grow our capability. And then we will also be procuring operators, both stevedores and rail operators and others as we go. We fill out the port precinct, discover what's required. We will be procuring with Fremantle Ports those operators to build their infrastructure once Westport has completed the base terminal and base marine infrastructure. I think the advantage of running this as a program as well is we have a lot of interfaces in a very active part of the world. The announcements obviously around defence, the announcements around the Global Advanced Industries Hub mean that we've just got an extraordinary confluence of infrastructure and development happening in this part of the world. And we've been working really actively with defence, with JETSI, with even into some of our utilities as well, and Perth Airports Corporation, talking to them just about how we manage the pipeline of work and infrastructure in a sensible way, not just in terms of the deployment of capital, but obviously the availability of asphalt or workers or whatever it might be. So we need to manage those risks very carefully, and that's best done at a program level where you can look at the full demand across all projects you're deploying, but also look at how we can optimise the opportunities that this big build stage will have in terms of enhancements to sustainability, workforce diversity, and other activities, collective work with Noongar people, collective work with communities, and other things. So we'll be engaging through a lot of these different areas as a program, which will really assist us working more efficiently. Just so you know about us, again, I thank the team before that was worked with us, and of course all our project partners, either contracted or other government partners, have been exceptional, and also just acknowledge Dom Boyle and Kath Lyons in particular. Kath's been with us from almost the get-go in terms of shepherding through the business case and planning project, an extremely complicated project, as I've said, and trying to manage a great group of people which have been working exceptionally hard, and occasionally get a dirty look, and I think I promised them a couple of months off when we got it done, and we're not able to do that anymore. But that's not fit for purpose as we move forward into definition and delivery. The job is no longer sort of talking about what should probably happen. It's actually about doing it, and the complexity of trying to do a project which is non-BAU, because we're targeting something in 2040, is dramatically different from just turning the handle on something we know how to do on a regular basis. So just so people understand, obviously Kath had responsibility for all strategy, corporate and other activities. You may have engaged with her or seen her speak. And Dom had responsibility for design logistics, commercial and economic, and environment and social, so all the technical side of things that resulted in delivery of the business case. But as we move forward, Dom will be picking up the PPD role, sitting over all of the landside infrastructure, so Anketel, Roe, Kwinana, the rail duplication, North Lake level crossing removal, but also sit on the ELT. We're currently going through a process with Public Sector Commission to be able to recruit a principal project director for marine infrastructure. We don't have lots of these type of people in the public service, so it's a particular bespoke position that we're going to need to procure. And you may have already seen in Tenders WA, we elected to procure the Director of Strategy and Policy and the Program Director for a period of 6 to 12 months, just because in a pre-election setting, it's going to be just too difficult for us to get all these executive positions approved and then recruited, and we really need to provide some great capability into the team right now. We've advertised as well the Director of Commercial and Corporate, and that position is live in the market right now, and the other two positions in terms of communications and supply chain ops We have people at the moment who are carrying those areas, and we'll plan further in the future. Kath is not, her name's not here, she's not leaving us. There is the need to consider the legislative framework that sits around Westport, and Kath will be leading a project looking at that policy environment and what we need to do to make sure we can deliver efficiently for the next 10 to 15 years. So I just wanted to give that quick update, because obviously we haven't been able to talk much, and people see little things popping up in the market and it's like, what are they doing? So I just wanted to explain to you that we're trying to sort of build some internal capability and sometimes temporarily while we get everything else sorted out. And that's why certain things have come to market in the way that they have. Now onto landside procurement. I'm going to now hand over to Dom to talk us through this. Dom, did you want to jump in?
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
share the slide.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Patrick. So just a bit of an update on where we're up to on the landside procurement. So as Patrick touched on earlier, we have a series of quite significant road and rail projects which will be delivered as part of the Westport Program. So around about 12 months ago, the preferred concept was announced by the government, and at that time, the Deputy Premier basically told everybody that she was very keen to get on with the Anketel Road and Kwinana Freeway projects as soon as possible. So we went out to market middle of this year with a consultancy contract to complete the project development for Anketel Road and Kwinana Freeway. There's also an option under that contract to include Row Highway, just depending on the timing of when that project comes forward. We actually awarded that contract on Friday, just gone, to a joint venture between GHD and BG&E. So congratulations to them, and we're just starting all the necessary mobilisation and project planning, and we'll really hit the ground running hard in January with that contract and those activities. In terms of whether Row Highway is included as an option under that contract or whether that option is exercised, that will really depend on the timing of the project and other considerations around market sustainability and those types of issues. For the rail projects for Westport, there are two major packages which were identified in the packaging approach which is set out in the commercial framework that inform the business case, and that's a significant level crossing removal on North Lake Road. The scale of that project is quite significant, and it probably merits a package of work on its own for delivery. And then there's the duplication of the existing freight line between Coburn and Kwinana, and that includes a series of level crossing removals, either grade separations or just closures across the existing rail line. So I've been speaking to Dave Thomas in Omted about the timing for this work, and when we come back in the new year and we've got the Anketel and Kwinana Roads project up and running, then I'll be sitting down with Dave Thomas to start planning out all of that procurement and packaging approach for the project definition stage. So I think you can expect to see similar consultancy contracts coming to market sort of later in 2025, so we can get cranking on those projects. In terms of delivery, as Patrick's already alluded to, there's no funding being allocated for the delivery of these projects yet. What I would say is that when projects do start coming to market, if delivery funding is allocated, you'd expect to see Kwinana Freeway and Anketel Road packages coming to the market first. We'd expect those to be sort of middle of 2026 to early 2027. Again, can't stress enough, all obviously subject to governments committing funding for delivery of those projects. So that's all from me. Hand back to Patrick.
All right. Thanks, Dom. In terms of the marine procurement, so obviously the geophysics has been awarded and that is underway, and some other site surveys are also underway in terms of hydrodynamics and groundwater. Geotechnical survey contract has been out to market, and we are planning on awarding that in 2025. That's going to be obviously a really, really important package of work for Westport. It's geotechnics is obviously critical for every project, but obviously for port infrastructure, key line design and breakwaters and dredging management planning, it's really quite crucial. A Marine Ports Technical Advisor package will be released hopefully towards the end of January. We planned on delivering it out in December, but with timelines, it's pushing back towards Christmas, and we have the let there be peace letter from the market, sort of saying let everyone have a bit of a rest over Christmas. So we're trying to be good corporate citizens and release it in January once everyone's had a bit of a break, and so we should be releasing that. And obviously that process will not be able to be concluded until after an election and a new government is returned and a new minister is able to approve it, which gives us sort of a timeline to, you're heading towards the middle of the year before anything could be awarded in terms of that technical advisor. At the moment, as you know, we retained the SCID contract and we are undertaking sort of preliminary activities through that without beginning any of the substantive TA work, because obviously that would cause complexity for the handover at that stage. We're looking also to procure an integrated delivery partner. At the moment, this is the intent. This is, as I said, this is our working assumption that this will be the model, and it remains so at this point, although we haven't obviously dotted all the T's and crossed all the I's. The IDP we anticipate being procured in 2025. That would be in a light type arrangement, obviously, and in the first instance, starting to build up good project management over the marine and ports engineering, design and engineering task, providing contract consultancy input into the TA, and helping prepare us for the procurement process and the definition of procurement strategies, which are part of our project definition plans, which need to be provided to the state government as part of their final investment decision, which we anticipate would be in the around 2027. The capital works, obviously, that would follow if government proceeds would obviously focus on Kwinana bulk terminal. It is crucial that that's up and running by mid-2031. And so that will be our main focus in terms of how we're structuring things to ensure that that piece of infrastructure is in place by then. Potentially as, and if we need to make some other sacrifices around the program to ensure that happens, and that's something we may be driven towards. In terms of the procurement, other major procurement, obviously, capital works follows the KBT. Will obviously, one of the first things will be the dredging contractors. I think we previously signalled a competitive ECI type arrangement for dredging contractors, which may be the first other marine aspect of that we go to market on, and then the remainder will be subject to our procurement strategy defined throughout the definition and development stage. In terms of procurement of operators, that's not imminent, so we will be sort of probably getting out and undertaking at the moment. The intent is all the base marine infrastructure is underway before we start to procure, start to think about the global EOI or whatever process we follow for the procurement of operators. But of course, they will be then that will be done well in time for them to undertake feasibility design, to order materials, particularly key cranes and other things from around the world, and to construct the full topsides and operations of the operations. And that will also include the railhead operator as we go through that process. In terms of TA, technical advisor for the marine ports, obviously. We sort of looked at this, do we reduce contract value? How do we actually manage this? But ultimately, we've got a very, probably not the most complicated piece of infrastructure in the world, but it is certainly very, very large for Western Australia, and it's operating in a very complicated operating environment with sort of, uncertain plans from defence and other activities taking place and a whole bunch of other developments in the Western Trade Coast needing to take place. So we're really looking to make sure we can bring on a partner that can be with us throughout the journey. There's no reason why, if the culture is good, the people are great, and the performance is solid, that shouldn't be the way we work. So we'll be seeking a pretty collaborative and integrated design partner to deliver the full suite of marine and port-related expertise. So this covers all the marine and ports infrastructure, from channels, breakwaters, the port, the back of port in terms of port precinct operation, Kwinana bulk terminal and Kwinana bulk terminal operations, which is a difference from the containers where we're not doing that because the stevedores will. We'd be looking as an integrated side of things. We'd like to be able to sort of bring on some younger maritime engineers and have them learn and develop as part of this, because I think we've had a decade of focusing on public transport and major roads, and I sort of feel that there's a lot of work to do in the port space. And the Premier indicated this the other day around Western Australia as we get ready for decarbonisation and other activities. There's a fair bit of work to be doing, and the state does need to build some capability. So we'll be looking for a proper integrated partner. We'd be looking to incentivise sensibly a couple of key result areas. We've had conversations with a number of different people. We're going to try very hard not to set up an overly complicated scheme of KPIs and KRAs. So we don't end up with spending a lot of time in the commercial space, and we're just working positively towards great outcomes. And potentially a staged long-term contract, which could be up to 10 years. If you think about the definition support that we need to get done over the coming couple of years, then support through the procurement of contracting, and then client support ongoing as we go into D&C, and obviously preparation for the expression of interest or procurement of stevedores. There's no reason on a good relationship and a good contract with a good partner that couldn't continue for a substantial period of time with those key stages as key points of review. We have also decided or envisaged that there will be one TA, and that's simply because, again, you can break things up too much, but it is very much an integrated delivery process. It's very much an integrated bit of equipment, and in terms of being able to respond to some new information that's going to come from outside of Westport, again, from defence and other activities, or potentially from regulators in consideration of EIA and the cumulative impacts which are happening around Westport from desal and defence and other activities. It's much more agile, and if we can just have one partner to help us through that process. We also view, obviously, it's not a regular sort of activity that we undertake, and so as with previous contracts in this space, we'd anticipate that there'd be a healthy mix of local content and local talent, of people who understand our market, our operating environment, who can really speak to actually how this project's going to work in Western Australia, in Cockburn Sound. And we'd expect that there'd be the global expertise brought to bear in those more technical ports and maritime spaces, which we don't have here. So it really would be a mix of personnel we'd be looking for. In terms of the scope, of course, we'll be reviewing the business case concepts that have been done very well, but of course there will be a lot of new information flowing in, which will allow us to review those and to optimise. We need to model and explore some port options, and then review those options as we look at external interfaces, extended trade forecasts and vessel forecasts. But again, the key thing for me is other activities that are happening around our project and that we might need to respond to, and even not just in terms of design, but even in terms of construction methodology and staging, to make sure we can have some industry sustainability about how we do develop this in the context of the demands on the market. Obviously, value engineering will be crucially important. I continue to talk to my team about how many primary schools or hospitals we can save through this project, and that's something that we'll be looking at our partner to think about as well. We really don't want to sacrifice those ambitious sustainability goals, but a good part of ESG, or the governance side of things, is making sensible decisions in the context of wider outcomes. And we've got to think about how we use public funding judiciously, given the substantial and extremely important calls on that budget as well. So optimisation, value engineering, for me, it isn't just around cost engineering. It really is about how do we optimise and deliver really, really well against those goals, and achieve those goals with less money, rather than being conservative in the space. So that's going to be really important to us. And then obviously undertaking the reference designs necessary to support project definition plans for the state, or project proposal reports for the Commonwealth, and the environmental approval documentation and compliance. And then, of course, that information will also feed directly into capital works contracts, and you're all very familiar about sort of the requirements in those processes. Technical, and that design will also support your cost estimates and our peer review cost estimate process that we'll be running as well. Yeah, as I said, and then further than that, not just the designs, but providing other inputs into the RFT documentation that will be supported by the integrated delivery partner and helping us to understand and to define the work that needs to go into that, and operational support on an ongoing basis. So that's largely the scope of services. I just wanted to touch a few things on the difference between the SCID contract and this. The SCID contract was included, obviously, a bunch of work on the marine and port space, but it also extended into looking at the whole supply chain modelling, and all of those other activities. This TA contract is very much restricted to the marine and ports aspect. It's really from the north of the Channel, which is up near Fremantle, down to around about the freight rail line in Kwinana, because that sort of is almost the battery limits. If you think about the marine and ports infrastructure space, that's where it connects to Anketel Road project. That's where it connects to Coburn-Kwinana rail duplication project. It really is the definition and the development activities in that regard. There will be other contracts that we let. We don't want to lose track of our system design and approach. So there will be some performance or system modelling that will be held elsewhere, and it'll be important and critical that the performance modelling and design that's being done in the marine port space or in the Anketel space or in the rail space can all plug into that, so we can make sure as a system we can look back and all the different decisions we make or the change requests that are put forward, or the opportunities and innovations that people want to apply, we can look at about how that's going to affect the whole system and make sure that we're continuing to forge towards those goals. We would also be looking at smaller contracts, potentially around materials innovation, around enhancing productivity, materials and logistics supply chains. Of course, getting everything that we're going to need to that Kwinana location, storing it, both materials and people, while you've got a thriving industrial ecosystem around you is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be something we're going to have to optimise for this. And we are in conversations with our colleagues in Defence and JETSI and other locations about the opportunity to do holistically for that area rather than just by project. And so that could be actually quite a major piece of work. There'll obviously also be a bunch of commercial procurements which we let in the coming years, both in terms of commercial support for getting on board the IDP, for working with stevedores and operators, fees and charges. There's a lot of other aspects outside of the infrastructure that we need to look forward to, and so there will be a series of contracts let for support in those areas, but of course they will be likely smaller than the infrastructure side of things. And of course, we need to, as it's not just about tooling up our people, but it's actually about tooling up our whole organisation to be able to deal with what could be a 10 to 15 years of WA's biggest infrastructure or government-led infrastructure program. And so we're obviously looking at how we do that in a staged way, so we don't overspend in the next couple of years, but we prepare ourselves for a government in case they want to proceed with the project in this current timeline and get on with it. So that's a bit of a list of where we're actually currently at in terms of our procurement timelines. I guess the key takeaways again is that the remainder of the road and rail definition activities we will be looking to see into the market next year. The marine and ports TA will be a one-off for a single TA contract for the entire marine and ports program at this stage, and we look to be letting that in late January. Award towards the middle of next year, and the integrated delivery partner, if we do proceed in that model, will be a bit later on. So those are the key big things we're dealing with at the moment. Now, in terms of this, Luke, this is where I want everyone to quickly look at that QR code and just to let us know via that process how often you as the marginally, it's quite a lot of people, I think it's about 450 odd people who've joined us, so thank you for all of your time. How often would you like to be hearing from us in this sort of just general update mode? Of course, if you want to send through any suggestions or other information about how we can make these more valuable or more useful while staying the right side of probity, I'm happy to hear about that. But if you could take a moment just to quickly look that up on SurveyMonkey and leave a note about how often you'd like these briefings to be undertaken, that would be really handy. Go to step to date. And then this, I'm sure you all have this. Is this going to be circulated?
It will be circulated,
Okay.
yes.
So the slide pack will be circulated, so you can pick all these details up afterwards as well.
Great. My name's Luke. I'm just chiming in to help Pat navigate some questions. We have got probably a good 10 minutes or so if there are questions. There's a couple that have already come up in the chat. There was one from Sarah before saying, do you anticipate that the smaller specialised project procurements are to be done by others, or could the successful TA proponent also put their hat in the ring for those?
I don't think there's we're working through our procurement strategy at the moment. Obviously, Anketel Road was a bit of a more straightforward one. You know, there's a well-trod machine for those sort of activities. Yeah, I at this stage don't see any reason why the TA couldn't put their hand in the ring for those. The current thinking around the commercial boundaries, and I do sort of say current thinking, please don't take my word on this, is that our technical advisor would be precluded from then delivering on any of the DNCs in the marine space that would follow in, that would be procured by Westport in the marine and port space. They would not be prevented from being the technical advisor or designer on any of the road projects. And they would not be obviously precluded from being the designer for any of the stevedores. You know, we can't really require them to follow any of our procurement side of things. So really, for us, it's just to make sure, just about making sure that the TA doesn't then go on and deliver any of the marine and port space infrastructure TAs. Apart from that, I don't see any reason why they couldn't apply for some of those smaller contracts, although we'd need to consider that, Sarah, and thanks for the prompt in terms of our probity framework to make sure that there's separation from some of those activities from the people that are sitting in our office. I would think maybe that we could get into some uncomfortable territory. Maybe if we'd had the TA on board for 2 or 3 years and we let something which they were very integrated with, maybe there would be a limitation there, but we'll have to investigate that further.
There's a question from Jamie just saying, can you please explain the role of the integrated delivery partner in a little more detail?
So probably not a great level of detail more because we are just focused at the moment on the TA, but I can come back to that with an update a bit later on, Jamie. But ultimately, the integrated delivery partner for us is a group of people that can come on board with some substantial expertise in managing and procuring and managing major marine infrastructure development, and you know, understanding all the construction management side of things, safety management, all of those activities would have to go into the delivery of marine infrastructure, particularly when you're talking about sort of, you know, dredging companies over here and marine infrastructure companies and then civil companies all working in cahoots. So it's really just providing us with a lot more capacity in terms of building our clients' team, if you like, to be able to do that, because but we don't because we just don't have that capability around. So what we'll do is I don't have anything to hand in sort of detail, and we are really at the front end of the detailed scope of that. We're working with KPMG on that at the moment, and we've had, you know, good conversations with some others who are running IDPs around the place at the moment, but we'll take that on notice, Jamie, and probably come back at the next one of these and give you a bit more detail. I would say that there is no intent at the moment on novating the TA into that integrated delivery partner, just in case that's of use and value for people to understand.
There was another question from Simon a little bit earlier about carbon. How are you accounting for carbon and other emissions? Is there a policy in place to require infrastructure partners to measure, optimise and report carbon and ESG metrics?
I'd say there will be. So we modelled carbon across part of the SCIM modelling under the SCIM contract. The supply chain integrated model was looking at a range of different metrics about how the supply chain performed, and that included, you know, the operational performance in terms of trying to bring it back to a cost per container, roll it back up to a cost per container cost. I was looking at the capex of the infrastructure involved. It was looking at the emissions from all operations across the supply chain, or also the emissions from the embedded materials and processes to create the infrastructure. So we tried to build emissions in from the very, very get-go, and that's been continued now in terms of our sustainability targets, which will be inserted into all procurements. It has been done, I think, now for the provided into the Anketel and Kwinana integrated project team, that they've sort of got our targets at the moment that we've put together, and sort of say part of that will be how do they design to that, giving us options about cost of achieving those targets, and then we'll make some decisions then about what targets we set into each of the capital projects. There's a bunch of work that we'll be doing. As I said, there's probably a number of smaller contracts which will be let. There's a lot of work we'll be doing in that sort of materials and innovation space with ONTID and others, just to try and see is like how can we use the scale of Westport, potentially with defence as well and others, and the rest of the transport ARP, to create enough of a commercial incentive for the market to invest in manufacturing lower carbon X, Y, and Z or new materials. And I think part of our, and so what we would like to do is, if Anketel, for example, is the first project off the mark, we'd set ambitious targets for Anketel, but we may not be able to hit what we need for a whole of net zero supply chain for the whole program. And what that means is we need to work harder to make sure that the specifications and the fabrication and everything is available for those contractors that come on and build the later infrastructure partners to hit some really high goals in terms of emissions. So there certainly will be reporting requirements around emissions and targets as we move into construction.
There's a couple of other questions that have come up. I can't promise we'll get to all of them, but there's one here from Ray that's had a few thumbs up on it, so I think we should address that one. You mentioned about competition for resources on a number of different projects. Has there been any capability and capacity supply chain mapping done to ensure there are sufficient resources to develop the projects?
We've started in terms of some of the BRM mapping in terms of what resources are around, Ray, but one of the conversations we were going to have, it fell by the wayside, but we've got to reinstigate it, was to have, we're going to get a bit of a get-together between the transport portfolio outside of Westport, Westport, Defence, Western Power, Perth Airports Corporation, and a couple of others, in terms of trying to map that full profile of demand, both for workforce and key materials over the next sort of 20 years, and just to look at where those unacceptable peaks were and where we might need to either, is there any opportunity to pull very large levers around schedule, or do we actually need to do something a bit more innovative? But certainly, Ray, we've got our first understanding of materials. I think we shared our first indicative understanding with the market through WATMIAG and others to understand what sort of materials quantums we need. And there is certainly a program in the near future to look at how we do the supply chain of materials, but also in terms of logistics getting in and out of the location. So I think that information we're doing for Westport, but what I'd like to see is the fact that a lot of those other very large projects that are working next to us in terms of either directly next to us or within the same 5 years are all doing that, and we can make some informed decisions around how we're going to look after the market capacity as well, or help it develop so it can provide provide the supply to meet the demands we all need.
There's a question from Don just saying, grateful to Westport for engaging potential construction materials vendors directly regarding sustainability recently. Can we expect that to continue directly, even if there is an advisory support procured regarding materials innovation?
Yeah, I think we had a meeting with a lot of the material suppliers and some contractors and others as part of our circular materials strategy work, the resource efficiency strategy work. And I think we indicated that we'd continue to try and have at least a quarterly or a 6-monthly meeting throughout the program. And I think, to Ray's point before, that's going to be really crucial for us, not just for yourselves to understand what we want to do, but actually for us to get intelligence from the market about, well, hang on, something's getting a bit shaky. We might see some risks going into this project if we can't think about doing things differently. So absolutely, Westport's never, one of our principles is operator-led, and up until now it's been very much operator-led in terms of who's driving across, or trains or containers across the supply chain, making sure we listen to them. But as we work into construction, it's obviously going to be needing to make sure we've got your input directly to us, and we wouldn't really outsource that. That's not really part of our ethos to just outsource that to a TA.
There's a question from Dino about media and video packages. There's nothing at this point, but I would say, Dino, you're in the right place. So if you stay tuned, then you're going to be across any of the updates that do come out. So keep your ears peeled. One last question, and then we might wrap it up, from Sarah again. Do you anticipate any other procurement mechanisms other than D&C for the port, road and rail project delivery, or is the decision on procurement mechanism still to be confirmed? Would you get industry input into this decision as per the process currently undertaken for some of the major road and rail projects?
Yes, no, and yes. So effectively, we've indicated if I can call it a collaborative D&C as our target model coming out of the commercial framework in stage 3. Collaborative D&C being particularly, there are some particularly unusual risks in this project. So there's going to be areas where we need to share risk rather than allocate it. And there are some great opportunities in terms of sustainability and other things that we'd like to hunt down jointly with a delivery with a construction partner when we get to that point. But the second reason really was if we target a collaborative D&C at this stage in terms of definition and development, we'll do the work that we think needs to get us to that point. And if we need to come back to a more relational contracting model, then that's easy to come back. Whereas if we set ourselves up for an alliance and then decided we want to change gears, it would be very difficult to go the other way. So the procurement model is one of the fundamental parts of a definition stage or development stage in a road project. Is you start with an end in mind, which for us is collaborative D&C, and then we'll come back to the right model when we've got a bit more information about risk and other information. And yes, our intent is to continue to talk to industry in the pre-competitive space as much as we can to make sure we set up sensible and good projects for us all to work on together.
Great. I think that's probably all we've got time for today. So again, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Appreciate it. Thanks for the questions. We'll run through the SurveyMonkey and we'll get a sense of how often you want to hear from us. And then we'll be in touch. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about next year.
Indeed. Thanks everyone for joining. See you soon.